That's right. Thank you. So thank everybody for coming out to Bloomsbury Books. We are going to talk tonight about something very important to each of us. My book is called Summoning Genius, a midlife guide. I'm reading it. A midlife guide to discovering identity, purpose, and meaning. And my name is Ben Hummell. I am a psychotherapist in town. I'm a marriage and family therapist, a licensed professional counselor, and I've been a spiritual counselor and teacher for about 30 years. I have a 35-year-old meditation practice. And above all, and most importantly, I am a human being. That's the most important, significant thing. A human being going through a human condition, which is what this book is about. There's two aspects of the human condition that I'm speaking about here. One is something that we all are aware of, going through times that are difficult. How do we get through them? Another aspect of the human condition we might not be aware of is a quality that we all have that we're going to call genius. And I'm going to show you how that's linked to an ancient idea of a guardian spirit that we are all born with that holds our talents and our beautiful qualities and leanings and keeps them safe for us until we're ready to step into them. So, what is genius? The Latin word genius means, like I said, guardian spirit, or the Greeks called it the daimon. And it's the idea where something is born with us that carries what we are meant to do, what we are meant to accomplish and experience in order to become fulfilled and have a complete and meaningful life, something that makes us really, really happy. And it's always coming from a specific gift that we have. And this comes into us when we're born. This is the ancient idea, as a seed that contains a blueprint for exactly who we're meant to be. And so along the way, we either get in touch with this seed and somehow let it grow and let it open up and find the rich soil through our experiences, or we don't. And this book is about finding that thing that we may have lost at midlife and different ways in which to find that thing and different ways in which the lack of that is showing up in our lives. So, the first thing that I want to read for you is about finding ourselves in a place where we don't really remember how we got here, but it doesn't feel too good. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. It's like, okay, I've done my job, I've gone through my schooling, I've had this relationship, I've had this experience, but something's missing. I'm not sure exactly quite what it is, but I'm uncomfortable in some way, some existential way. And so the idea that at midlife, which for the purpose of this book, literally is anywhere between, it's arbitrary, but there's the clock. It's arbitrary, but it's time. It's midlife time. Anywhere between 34 and early 60s for the purpose of what we're going to be talking about tonight, depending on where psychologically we have developed along the lines, or we have stopped developing, or we have a block or something like that. So the idea that we need to do a course correction. We're going to use the metaphor of a boat on the ocean to show how using genius can correct our course and get us back on course to what we're here to do individually as individual seeds of genius. So, course correction. The idea is, say there's a boat and it's on the ocean, and here's the metaphor. The boat is never really on course, as it is consistently being blown off course by changing winds and sea currents, and that the helmsman is steering the boat by constantly correcting the course of the boat towards the direction he's heading. So when we're doing this with our lives, when we're feeling, oh, it's not quite right, and I've got to look for this sign and I've got to look for that sign, this deliberate participation in the minutiae of the journey engages the helmsman to be consciously awake and alive in his task. The wind provides the needed energy for the journey, and the course corrections he makes always point in the direction of his destination. Embracing the idea that our life, like a boat on the sea, is always off course and in need of consistent corrective steering can be a difficult proposition. As Aristotle postulated centuries ago, nature abhors a vacuum. In my experience, it seems as if nature also abhors a straight line. We'd like to believe that we can set a course and continue straight ahead in one direction in order to meet our goals and aspirations. However, if we can look back at our lives and remember the different experiences we've had, we will see that almost without exception, the plans that we made invariably changed due to unforeseen events that took place. The fact is that the necessity of course corrections makes our life deep and interesting. The processes that we must go through in order to make those corrections change and transform us into more authentic people. By the time midlife rolls around, most of us are due for a significant course correction. Sometimes, when we get a moment of rest from running the daily operations of our life ship and actually look up at the horizon and say, where am I? How did I get here? Where am I heading? We've been sailing without steering for such a long while that it can actually be quite surprising and disturbing when we finally pick our heads up to look out at where we are. Many times, we find that we're living a life that we just sort of fell into out of necessity, convenience, or habit, and that we're not actually living the life we want to live. We may find ourselves in a job we hate, experiencing health problems from lack of exercise or bad eating habits, having an addiction to alcohol or drugs, or going through a divorce or addiction or depression. All of these things are possibilities of midlife, and it is exactly at this point that we can become psychologically sober with the bracing realization that we are not where or who we want to be. With a type of existential sobriety, we can begin again to steer the ship of our life on a desirable course and consciously choose where we want to go. This time, we will know that the course corrections are normal, everyday occurrences, and that what engages us to act keeps us vital and alive. So that's kind of what happens in this book. It's all about being able to change something when you find out that something is missing, instead of just being stuck and stagnant. This book is about movement of any kind of energy that has become stuck in our lives and feels like, oh, I'm trapped in this life and I don't know what to do. The book gives really helpful suggestions and exercises and things to help move that energy around and turn it into something much more creative. So, part of what happens at midlife is we realize that what we've been doing is no longer working, but we don't know what to do to change it. We know something is just not happening, and we can feel it in every way. It shows up in so many different symptoms and so many different weird ways, but we don't know. So here's a story that kind of illustrates the predicament that we're in. Two friends went out on an adventure through the wilderness and started out by taking their canoe up a beautiful river. There were long stretches of calm water alternating with fast-moving rapids that challenged them to respond in each moment. At every new turn in the river, their trusty canoe rose to the occasion with steadiness and balance and carried them through each calm and turbulent passage. One day, as they paddled their canoe, they noticed that the river was becoming increasingly narrow and shallow until they eventually came to a place where the water flowed into an opening in the ground. Beyond that point, there was only a forest thick with trees and underbrush. The friends, in order to continue their journey, decided to carry their canoe on their heads and hike through the woods that lay before them. Since the trees were so many and there was no worn path on which to walk, the friends were having an incredibly difficult time and were making little progress forward. Finally, they met an inhabitant of the forest who asked them why they were carrying the canoe. They said, "This canoe has served us so well and faithfully up until now, we cannot abandon it. due to our sense of immense gratitude for it. Besides, we may need it again someday. The forest dweller responded by saying, "You're now in a different landscape. Ahead of you are many miles of forest, and beyond that, there are mountains so tall and majestic that they'll take your breath away. Although your canoe has brought you this far, it can no longer help you to make any progress on your journey. In fact, it has now become your greatest hindrance to moving forward." So the things that have helped us before, our coping mechanisms, our philosophies, our strategies, they wear out. They don't make sense anymore. We find ourselves in a different landscape, a different place. And we need to use something different. And we get freaked out sometimes when we don't know what that thing is. And so that's why the inbuilt genius qualities that we carry with us at midlife is a perfect thing to look for. Perfect. So the quality of genius, what's interesting about genius is that it has a persistent quality. It will always let us know that it's there, and it will always give us a poke to let us know we're ignoring it. It irritates us. It'll show up as all kinds of different things, but it's there to remind us you have something here that you're meant to do. You have something here that you're meant to share as a gift to the rest of the world, and by sharing that thing, it's going to bring you fulfillment. Okay? So, a little example of that is my cat. I have a cat named Alvin, who, like his cartoon chipmunk namesake, is always causing some kind of trouble, like taking fireplace ashes through the house or occasionally using our bathtub for his litter box. He always presents us with a challenging and at times irritating situation. He's also perennially hungry. He has no talent for self-regulation when it comes to eating, so I have to monitor his food intake lest he vomit on the carpet. He is my constant companion regardless of what I'm doing while at home, and he consistently remains within arm's length of me. Although he likes a good head scratch, his main modus operandi is to remind me to feed him. His eternal hope is that whenever I get up to do something around the house, my movement is a sign that he's going to be fed. When he feels that I have neglected him long enough, he'll gently swap my face with his paw, annoyingly chew on my hair, or meow incessantly. He knows exactly how to irritate me enough to act on his behalf. His name might as well be Genius. And that's kind of what happens. So furthering that idea of Genius's persistence is another place, another passage. So the good thing about Genius at this time in our lives is that it's never going to let us alone. That's how much a part of it, of us it is. It doesn't leave us alone. It has a mandate for us. It has a purpose, and it wants to make sure that we do what we came here to do. So luckily for us, Genius has a persistent quality and will not let us rest in stagnancy. Regardless if we turn within and listen to it or not, it continues to send its messages into our lives in imaginative and creative ways. Its communication may appear as a moment of inspiration when we notice a glint of sunlight through a window, or it could easily manifest as a symptom of an illness, physical or psychological. Whatever the expression, it comes to awaken us to a greater potential that we're not yet living. Regarding our personal genius, James Hillman says, each life is formed by its unique image, an image that is the essence of that life and calls it to a destiny. As the force of fate, this image acts as a personal genius, an accompanying guide who remembers our calling. The genius motivates, it protects, it invents and persists with stubborn fidelity. It resists compromising reasonableness and often forces deviance and oddity upon its keeper, especially when neglected or opposed. Our genius, then, is the thing that forever remembers and reminds us of our unique calling. We can consider ourselves extremely lucky to have ourselves inconvenienced in this way, being consistently disturbed by our genius when we are ignoring what we have come here to do. Genius will never stop speaking to us in any way it can. Like water, it'll flow through any tiny crack in our life template. It's our job to make the cracks bigger so that more genius expression will shine through us and into the world. So, as a psychotherapist, and I don't know about you, Dan, but we all love to come up with syndromes. So I've come up with my own for the purpose of this book, and it's called GDS, Genius Deprivation Syndrome. And I'll tell you the symptoms so you can see if you have it or not. You can analyze yourself. If we look at what happens to the human brain from oxygen deprivation, we know that in most cases brain cells begin to die after 1 minute of no oxygen supply, and after 3 minutes of not breathing, our bodies usually die altogether. This is a very small window of time to be without an essential life-sustaining element before some kind of permanent damage is done. This fact also suggests that we are interdependent beings that count on a myriad of conditions continuously occurring for us in just the right way and in the correct proportions. These conditions are provided for us so consistently that they go generally unnoticed and underappreciated. Air, water, light, darkness, and the functions of the immune system and other bodily systems are all freely provided and performing perfectly without taking any credit or demanding our acknowledgement. As human beings, we also have the need for meaning and purpose. We can fool ourselves into thinking that these are merely electives or low-level priorities, since their absence doesn't kill brain cells or lead to physical death. But meaning and purpose, which are the products of making space for genius expression, are intrinsic to our inner lives. Fortunately, if we discover that we have been genius deprived and that a part of our interiority has died, we can activate the phoenix-like nature of consciousness that resurrects itself from the ashes of our previous identities. We may carry the experience of our youthful selves having died from a lack of creativity and personal expression, but when we acknowledge our genius spirit and give it room to move, we are born and live again regardless of how dark and deep our graves have been. Symptoms of genius deprivation syndrome may include weak libido or life force, depression, anxiety, feeling stuck in an unrewarding job or career, feeling that something important is missing from your life, feelings of purposelessness and lack of life meaning. The need for our genius expression in midlife has never been greater. Our genuine callings are seeking expression through us, and if we continue to deprive ourselves of them or to confuse their signals to us with some sort of illness, we'll continue to suffer. Since it's natural to want to put an end to our suffering, we can thank the uncomfortable feelings associated with genius deprivation syndrome for being a motivating force for lasting personal change. So there's my syndrome. My very own syndrome. I love that. So how do we start to listen to what our genius is asking us to do? How do we start to get the message? That's the big question, because many people just blob through life feeling crappy and they don't know why and they don't know what to do about it. But if you are feeling really bad and you have some level of consciousness, you know, I've got to do whatever I can do. Sometimes when I'm feeling really bad, I know that I am on a threshold where I can either feel bad or I can sort of move myself across the threshold and try to move some of the energy around. So I start dancing. I'm a terrible dancer. But I put on music and I dance. And I might not feel like dancing, but I know that that movement is getting me in touch with something that's moving in life, something that's already flowing. And so I'm trying to get myself in step with that. And there's a lot of different exercises and things that people can do to get that energy moving and get back into the rhythm of life again. So learning to listen to the genius. Learning to listen. There's a Native American Ojibwa saying It says, sometimes I go about in pity for myself, and all the while a great wind is bearing me across the sky. And so the idea of genius is that whatever you have as your genius is pulling you towards it as much as you want to go towards it. The effort that you're putting to get there, the same amount of effort is coming back to us. We're so used to thinking in the West that we got to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps against the world that's against us, and we've got to do everything ourselves. But this concept of genius, this idea, is there's something pulling us towards a destiny that's going to make us really happy, a personal one. The best way to frame the idea of listening for our genius callings is to embrace the notion that while we're searching and striving for our goals, aspirations, and dreams, there's something else that wants the same for us and is calling us forward towards it. In other words, we're not alone in the struggle for self-expression and fulfillment. Something else is making an effort on our behalf, trying to pull us toward what we want. This something else is our guardian spirit, genius, which already knows what will fulfill us and provide us with a rich and enjoyable life. Remember that our own unique genius accompanied us into this life with a fully completed blueprint of what we are intended to do in order to become our individual, integrated whole people. However, most of us are completely unaware of how this pull of genius feels or how to recognize it when it is actively calling us towards something specific. The key to being able to listen to what is calling us toward it, or to hear the voice of our genius, is to develop the knack of tuning into our feeling selves. The feeling part of us receives signals directly from genius in the form of images that arise simply out of nowhere. People describe some peak moments of hearing their genius as, quote, that moment when something in me knew I was supposed to. Developing the knack to live in these moments, which are timeless and transcendent moments, adds the genius dimension to our lives, and the more we can take these mysterious moments of clarity seriously, the more inner guidance we can receive and use. As we develop the habit of giving credence to what is speaking to us in the quiet corner of our awareness, we can't expect anyone else to understand or agree with what we're doing. It's a solitary endeavor. We have to risk being misunderstood by others in order to understand ourselves and our genius spirit more fully. So that's kind of the dilemma. Each of us is so individual. By the time we get to listen to those little voice where it's kind of pulling you forward, your partner may be like, why are you painting the garage with a mandala? Why are you starting to cook Himalayan food? I eat hamburger. All those things you've got to, take a risk for your own authenticity. It's a challenging thing sometimes, isn't it? And there's a story, and I hope my friend Leela doesn't mind me telling this. Something that happened to her. It kind of illustrates this. It's okay if I tell it? Okay. Well, one day she was up in the woods hiking, and she was, she's got millions of ideas just going constantly. She's an idea person, solving problems. She didn't notice she was coming really close to the edge of a really steep cliff, and before she knew it, the ground gave way beneath her feet. She fell off. She just managed to grab a root of a tree that was hanging there. So here she is, hanging off the side of a cliff, big precipice below. And she's like, oh no, how did I get here? What is going to happen? And she starts to do something that she didn't do very often. She says, God, if you are up there, please tell me what to do. I'll do anything. I'm asking for your guidance. God, if you're up there, tell me what to do. I really need to know because I don't know what to do. There's nothing I know. I'm just baffled. I'm just really scared. God, if you're up there, tell me what to do. And oddly enough, through the clouds, she hears this big booming voice. And it said, let go. And Leela said, is there anybody else up there? And so that's what happens with genius. When it gives your little signal, gives you your instructions, It's not always comfortable for your current state. It always almost demands that you move out of your level of comfort for your next basic incarnation within this same lifetime. So, yeah, it's not always convenient to hear your genius, but it is what's necessary. So one of the most... You'll have to ask her. You'll have to ask her. She's sitting there. She survived. She survived. She's right there and she's smiling. So something good happened. So perhaps the most important knack of all is the ability to keep moving in spite of the obstacles we may find on our path as we live from day to day. It takes the wisdom that comes from years and years of lived experience to be able to summon the agility of consciousness needed to follow the flow of life as it is presented to us in the moment. This wisdom tells us that even though we may be facing a dilemma that seems quite impossible to overcome, we've already lived through similar or even worse situations that have come and gone again and again. At midlife, we already know the pain of having tried to resist the changes in our lives that have taken place, and we finally have enough perspective from the first half of our life to know that the changes happen whether we resist or not. Now we have earned the capacity to choose to accept what the present moment is bringing us as a gift for our further development as deeper and more nuanced human beings. Flowing with the present moment is a poetic response to the mysterious universal intelligence that is choreographing this world play that we find ourselves in. It's having to step outside. It's a creative response that can enliven and invigorate us by having to step outside of the entrenched routines we've created for ourselves. The fact is, we need daily challenges and difficulties in order to continue to truly be alive. And a quality of the universe is to provide them to us in whatever guise necessary to accomplish this goal. So, we never know what's going to happen from day to day, but we do know that we have the capacity through living this long, because here we all are. I can see everybody there, and I know every one of us has faced things that we didn't want to face, and things that we did not think we could get through, but somehow, here we are. Once again, we're here. We're still here. That doesn't stop. And there's more help that we can get by tuning into an untapped part of us that has the blueprint for what we're individually supposed to do here. So, I want to talk about libido. Now, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Anybody? Sex. Okay, so thank you, Sigmund Freud. Not you, I'm talking about Freud's idea of libido. I'm a Jungian by nature and by training, and I'm going to read a little bit about the difference between Freud's idea of libido and Jung's idea of libido. And so Jung says, what is it at this moment and in this individual that represents the natural urge of life? That is the question. By the time many of us reach a midlife crossroads, which may manifest with such issues as health concerns, changing of jobs, marital problems, or a nagging question of life purpose, we probably will have noticed a drop in libido. Libido is the life force energy or natural urge and desire of life needed for us to move forward into the next chapter of our lives with enthusiasm and creativity. Without the access to a full-flowing libido, the task of stepping into a new psychological space or life expression will seem daunting, if not impossible. The Latin word libido, meaning desire or lust, was used by Sigmund Freud in his theories to represent psychic energy, specifically the sexual energy of human beings as outlined in his theory of the psychosexual stages of development. As a consequence, libido is the term commonly used today when referring to the strength of a person's sexual drive. Jung, who spent time in his early career as Freud's protege, saw libido as having to do with more than sexuality. His understanding was that libido was an impulse or desire that remained unchecked by any type of authority. He saw it as the natural appetite of our life force for different levels of human experience and expression. Regarding the libido's qualities, he said, the libido has, as it were, a natural penchant. It's like water, which must have a gradient or a slope in which to flow. That is to say that libido will move on its own like water when there's a gradient, slope, or pathway, and that the task of the individual is to create or allow a conducive channel for it to flow. It takes an effort on our part to allow libido to flow effortlessly. Just a quick note, Jung's departure from Freud's concept of libido was not convenient for him. It landed him in a state of contention with Freud, who had mentored him in his early career and had groomed him as a successor to his theories. However, Jung saw libido as he saw it from his own world of genius insight. He chose to be true to his individual convictions, which led to a split with Freud and a confusing period of time for Jung, which included a psychotic break. He was willing to pay the price to be authentic and to be true to his genius qualities. Our genius spirit is part of this natural life urge and has its own instinctual desire to express its unique qualities outwardly into the world. We can help to bring out this expression by paying attention to the messages that are consistently coming from our genius spirit and by allowing ourselves to imagine again. Imagination can create the gradient or slope that Jung spoke about, which allows the water of our life force to move and flow again. It's essential to the genius spirit to have this free movement of energy in order for it to become a part of our conscious life expression. If we can imagine, wonder, and become open and available to its desire for expression, we will be able to experience the happiness and freedom and satisfaction that specifically comes from expressing our individual and unique genius qualities. A great question for those who feel that their vital life force has stagnated in midlife is, how can I create the conditions to allow my libido life force to move and flow again? What we should realize is that even getting to a point in our lives when we can feel the stagnancy and ask the question is setting the stage for change. It has taken a great deal of unconscious effort applied to the repression of our natural genius tendencies to stagnate a vital, boundless energy such as libido, whose primary quality, like water, is the provision of the energy that provides movement. Movement means that something different can actually happen and something can definitively change. At midlife, most of us are ready for that change and are willing to do whatever it takes individually to facilitate a slope so that our water-like libido can move and thus change us. And so I'm going to ask everyone here if they would like to participate in a little guided exercise on moving libido that you can take with you from here and practice if you'd like. So if you're interested and willing, it's probably better to do with your eyes closed or if your eyes slightly closed and gazing down. I'll go through this exercise and see what you come up with. I'm not going to ask anyone to share anything about it. So this is your private time. And let's see what happens. Okay. So when you're comfortable, you have a small garden that is in desperate need of water. Your plants are drying up and there is no sign of rain in the immediate future. You decide to go in search of a source of water. Imagine walking up a grassy hill. You're carrying a shovel with you. On top of the hill, you discover a small pond. You can see that the pond water is still and that someone has built a raised mound of dirt around its edges. Without anything moving into it or out from it, it has become stagnant and dead. Take note of the color of the water. Can you see into it or is it opaque? Is there anything growing in the pond? Flowers, water plants, algae? Do you notice anything living in the pond? Fish, turtles, snakes, snails, anything? What kind of smell does the pond have? The pond has a voice. What does it say to you? You remember that where you live, down the hill, you're in need of water for your garden. What have you planted in your garden? What condition are your plants in? You begin to use your shovel to dig through the wall surrounding the pond to release the water. What do you discover in the dirt that you dig up? Is it easy or difficult to dig through the wall? Do you finally succeed in getting to the water? If not, what's in your way? If you do get through, you notice that the water begins to flow naturally downhill towards your garden. Does it trickle or run down in torrents? Has the quality of the water changed? So take a few moments to witness any feelings or insights that arise from this experience. This is an inner exercise of symbolically creating a slope for your life energy to move along and to become active in your life experience again. In this way, you can utilize the energy that has been stuck and misdirected to things that don't serve you anymore. When this life energy is allowed to move, it will take its natural path, reawakening your genius traits and life purpose. Okay. So, good. So that's something you can use in different forms. Be creative with it to help if you feel stuck. So, anybody familiar with the idea of alchemy when it comes to psychology? A few of us?
Of what?
Alchemy when it comes to psychology. One of the wildest things that happens in people's lives is every once in a while we find ourselves in a state of chaos. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Yeah, sometimes things are just messed up. Some things are just, it's not good right now. And it's a state of chaos. It's a state where everything is torn up. And the alchemists, the people who turn lead into gold, basically, or who turn the prima materia, the dark matter, into something valuable, they learn to appreciate chaos as something creative. And so I'm going to read a little bit about chaos. One of the deep and urgent questions about life meaning and purpose appearing during midlife can do for us is to create the perfect conditions for new beginnings to occur. Enthusiasm, inspiration, vision, and creative energy all need rich and fertile ground from which to sprout and grow. In order for the ground of our consciousness to become fertile with potential, it first needs to be disturbed. Something needs to turn it over, cracking the hard surface and exposing what was once underneath to the open air and sunlight. Things that we may have successfully hidden from ourselves and from others for a long time, including a deep dissatisfaction with the way our lives have been going, suddenly come to the surface and demand our attention. Our conscious soil can be disturbed by a myriad of occurrences, such as an illness, a breakup with a partner, or moving to a new area, or changing jobs. Whatever the reason, our inner worlds are thrown into chaos. Familiar patterns of thinking are disrupted. People that we used to count on for bearings and reference in our lives may no longer serve that purpose. And instead of having answers, we are thrown into a chaotic world of unending questions and doubts about who we are as a person and where we're heading. This state may sound grim and unbearable, but we have to remember that in order to create a possibility for something new, something old has to go. Chaos can be seen as the spring cleaning of our consciousness. And things that we haven't used or haven't worked for a long time will have to be discarded to create the space needed for newness and potential. The chaos that is created from cleaning out our inner drawers, closets, and garages comes from the natural pendulum swing and course correction that life itself brings, and our only job is to keep ourselves from going out to the curb and retrieving the discarded junk that has been cluttering our inner hallways for far too long. Getting used to the idea that chaos is a good thing requires a certain amount of trust in the transformational process. For this, we can look to the idea of alchemy. The concept of alchemy is a useful metaphor for our inner transformation. The basic supposition held by ancient alchemists was that one could take a base metal such as lead, place it in some kind of vessel or container, and through the application of certain transformative processes such as heat, cold, or liquefaction, transform it ultimately into gold. In psychological terms, the alchemical process is the transformation of unconscious psychic material into the conscious realm with the ultimate goal of creating the philosopher's stone, which is the final outcome of our purest and highest potential as human beings. The process always begins with what is known as prima materia, or primal matter. One simile for this primal matter is none other than chaos. It is of little wonder that a term alchemists used to describe our primal chaos was the Latin term massa confusa, massa meaning mass, load, or burden of material, and confusa meaning to be thrown into disorder, to trouble, or to disturb. What the alchemists knew was that chaos was a necessary and fortunate state. It contains the building blocks of any kind of transformation. So that's the key. Learning that disturbances are not our enemies, they're our friends. It's our friend. And that's a real difficult thing and a very advanced quality for a human being to develop, to somehow embrace a disturbance, knowing, okay, this is temporary, this is going to happen, it's going to change something in me, and I'm going to go with it. I'm going to go along with it. In order to use the chaos in our lives as a transformative vehicle, we will first have to recognize the life-changing potential that inner upheaval and chaos contain, and more importantly, learn to allow the change to happen instead of fighting it. We must learn to see our chaos as a friend who is taking our car keys after a night of drinking too much and interrupts our long-practiced tendency to drive home drunk. Or we can see chaos as a surgeon who recognizes that to save our life, she must first remove our ruptured appendix so that the toxins being released don't actually kill us. Instead of being anesthetized for this psychological operation, however, we're required to be conscious and awake the whole time. A problem arises when we think we have to do something during this confusing time to fix what is wrong. At any time we experience something unpleasant, we naturally want it to stop hurting. We want to preserve the continued functioning of our lives as we have come to know them. What we have to realize about this period of chaos and transformation is that it's necessary but also temporary. It's like we're riding on a crowded bus when another passenger gets on and we have to move a little bit to make room for him. Although it may be crowded and uncomfortable, we trust that things will sort themselves out and that we will make our way out of the crowd when we reach our stop. We know this because it happens all over the world every day. We make some space, wait, and trust. We can also make space for the chaos and just stand there for a little while in a state of trust as things sort themselves out. We can't plan or control the ebb and flow of our passengers on the bus any more than we can plan or control an inner transformation. We can just learn to let it happen. Nothing is going wrong. Our ship is righting itself and correcting its course towards a promising future. So an element of trust has to come in when we have disturbances. And where that trust comes in, it's got to come from someplace very deep, because it's just a natural reaction not to want to hurt and not to want to feel bad. But it's part of the gift of having lived as long as midlife is knowing that things come and go. Come and go. Good times, bad times, hard times, easy times. They come and go. And learning to deal with that and learning to roll with that as it comes is just an immense gift to be able to acquire. So, now that we're over with the terrible warnings of chaos, we're going to come into something a little bit, well, we're going to stay there for a little while. Okay. There is a beautiful word, and the word is disillusionment. I love that word. It's something that can free us. And so I wrote a bit about that. Many years ago, while I was visiting the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, I came upon a painting by Swiss painter Ferdinand Hodler entitled The Disillusioned. I remember seeing this distraught figure of a barefoot man dressed in robes sitting on a small wooden bench. His brow is wrinkled, and his eyes are wide open and cast down, as if to suggest a mixture of worry and defeat, or some terrible truth having been realized. His expression communicates the weight and responsibility thrust upon a person who has suddenly and simultaneously had the ideas of himself and his world razed to the ground. The responsibility this painting implies is that of continuing with his life somehow without the slightest idea of how to move forward. This task includes the feeling of the pain of the past while embarking on a new life chapter, which can be viewed as the existential mandate of being able to remember what has happened to us while dreaming of what our futures could be simultaneously. Oddly, I remember feeling quite optimistic at seeing this painting. It was a strange feeling at the time, as the painting clearly depicts an older man in a state of total despair. I think the word disillusion was revelatory to me, as it pointed to the fact that one's illusions can be taken away and can make one sad and despondent initially, but a less precarious and illusory life is being heralded by this same occurrence. I had not yet reached midlife at the time, but nevertheless received the message that there were challenges to come that would strip the illusions I had had of myself and of the way I regarded the world, making way for a more expanded viewpoint and depth of understanding. Little did I know that I would one day take this man's place, sitting on the little wooden bench, eyes cast down, worried and wondering what the hell I was going to do next. The definition of the word disillusion is, quote, to free from or deprive of illusion, belief, idealism, etc., disenchant. Most of this phrase sounds quite positive. It contains the words to free from, which suggest a previous state of bondage or imprisonment from which one is released. This kind of incarceration is within the shackles and bars created by beliefs and idealism, which can be the strongest prison of all for keeping a human being locked away. The word disenchant in this definition comes from the Latin word incantare, which means to enchant or fix a spell upon. Part of being disillusioned is therefore to be freed from an enchantment or a spell under which we have been living. The spell of identifying with a form of a psychological prison is broken, and we realize that we are now responsible to break free from our self-imposed limitations of beliefs and ideals that no longer serve us and can take us no further in life. Our basic ideas about ourselves, or our schemas, serve as a platform for our very personality and ego, and without them we feel hopelessly lost and helpless. Allowing them to change into newer and more appropriate ideas that support our current lives is usually facilitated by an experience of great disillusionment, and this is a completely natural and healthy phenomenon. But allowing them to be changed is similar, again, to undergoing surgery without anesthesia and subjecting ourselves to the surgeon's work without resisting or getting in the way. Such a surgery and a realization is an initiatory rite of midlife. We don't realize how we got here, but we know for sure that something on a basic level of our identity isn't working anymore. It is at this point that we have a choice to make. We can either attempt to maintain the status quo and cling to the ideas, ideals, and identifications of our younger years, or we can allow the natural tide of human life to carry them out to sea. If we hold on to the ideals of our past, we're out of step with life and will continue to suffer. If we let these identifications go through conscious awareness and regardless of how bitter the separation tastes, The space left by their absence becomes fertile ground for the emergence of a new life schema or identity, which includes the deep knowledge gleaned from our past experiences, along with a new world full of possibility existing outside the walls of our old prison. We can begin to dream of the future again, and of things that were previously impossible from behind the bars of our old worn-out identity. Again, rediscovering genius is the perfect avenue for this identity transformation. Getting back to the roots of our individualism through creative play and expression is a way of turning the soil of our consciousness so that the seeds of possibility that are present there have a chance to sprout. Making an environment within ourselves that is conducive for our genius traits to emerge and express is what this opportunity is about. Our genius qualities and talents are underutilized in important parts of ourselves, and now is an auspicious time to bring these gifts to the foreground. At Midlife, it takes a disillusionment to clear the way for more rewarding existence that can be filled with work that is satisfying, relationships that are built on mutual respect, and a general gratitude for the wisdom of the universe, which has obviously been guiding us without our knowledge all along. So now something important on finding genius is engaging again as adults in play. How many of us here, if you want to raise your hand or not, take time to play? Let me see. Great, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty good average for the size of the room. Playing, there's like no reason to do it. It's just for fun. And we leave that a lot in our childhood. We leave it off and we just leave it alone because we got responsibilities. We've got all these different things we need to do. And it just gets lost. But it's so important to engage in that as an adult to open up space for something new to happen. Our genius can always be found in creative play. Simply listening to our genius impulses can point us in the right direction for this kind of rewarding expression. Remember, that genius doesn't operate by reason or logic. To follow the trail of genius, we have to be willing to trust that the voice inside of us that is calling us. Spontaneity is the hallmark of following our genius, and there is no greater way to practice spontaneity than in play. People have accomplished amazingly creative endeavors for a singularly simple reason. They weren't aware that their project couldn't be done. That is to say, they allowed themselves to play with the inspiration they received from their genius spirit and treated their play and imagination with seriousness and determination, as if it were something that mattered greatly and needed to happen. They didn't become distracted by the stories of others' failures to accomplish similar things, but chose instead to approach an imaginative idea with a sense of unique freshness available through connection with genius. David Campbell writes, "When truly creative people come up with a new idea, they don't reject it immediately because of its flaws. They play with it, looking for strengths and sliding over its weaknesses." Playing allows for the growth of all things it touches. Ideas, skills, creativity, and our self-awareness and understanding are accelerated and placed in high relief. How we approach play depends on how much we are willing to see through the eyes of our genius qualities, which will always move like water through difficult situations to find a space to emerge. Looking with the eyes of our genius changes our perception of events, as in this story. One day, a teacher and his students were making their way through a small village. They walked past a heap of garbage and trash where someone had thrown the body of a dead dog. The students were expressing revulsion and disgust at the grotesque features and stench of the dog's rotting corpse as they walked by. The teacher, seeing the sunlight shining on the carcass, remarked, "Look at how white that dog's teeth are." Looking more deeply into this story, is this a matter of the teacher simply choosing to be positive? Is he merely being a contrary to his students? There may be another explanation for his response to this experience. He may be seeing creatively and playfully. He may be seeing through the eyes of his genius that doesn't deny that there will always be ugliness in the world, but gravitates to the beauty that exists regardless of that fact. So that's kind of our choice. What do we want to see? What do we want our lives to be about? We have that choice literally every moment. What do we want to focus on? Because I can tell you right now, everyone sitting here, I guarantee there's something on everyone's body that hurts right now, whether it's your butt in those uncomfortable chairs, there's a stone in your shoe, something. And you can be focusing on that, or the 95% of the rest of your body, which is not calling attention to itself because it's working perfectly fine. I mean, that's the play of consciousness that we're talking about here. That's the movement that we need to engage in. So there's always going to be something. Where do we want to place our consciousness? Where do we want to put our energy? And so, one of the last things I want to read to you is a beautiful thing about the word teleos, the Latin word teleos. So the ancient Greeks had a word that will assist us in this explanation of our genius calling, teleos. This word was used by philosophers such as Aristotle to mean end, goal, or purpose. Aristotle's idea was that everything in creation is moving from an imperfect state to a state of perfection. Just as an acorn contains the blueprint for an oak tree, moving from potential to manifestation, we contain the genius seeds of the perfect expression of who we are actually in potential. Looking at our lives teleologically is to see that each one of us is being pulled toward becoming a perfect specimen of what we're destined to be. We are born as seeds of something greater. Sadly, many of us live our entire lives as seeds, never responding to our natural growth progression, and consequently never unfold into our mature form. A seed is not meant to live as a seed. Its purpose is to grow into something else. If it doesn't fulfill that purpose, it stagnates and rots. This unlived potential is one of the causes of sadness and depression and manifests in our lives as a myriad of symptoms affecting us mentally and physically. By becoming aware and responding to our innate genius, we can participate with the teleological journey that we're here to undertake. The ingredient that has been missing in most of our experiences is that we feel that we're alone on this endeavor and that our struggle to become what we actually are occurs in our own personal vacuum. This is far from true. Our struggles to germinate and grow are being witnessed by our genius spirit, and genius is pulling us towards our potential as much as we are struggling to get there. An acorn has the potential of the oak tree inside of it, but it must go through the necessary steps in order to become one. Our struggle to encounter and express our genius qualities can be seen as our willingness, like the acorn, to be planted underground and go through the process of germination. We'll need to turn within ourselves and be quiet in order to listen for the next clue. What happens next for the acorn is that within its dark and damp earthen enclosure, it splits open. We go through necessary crises when we experience cracks in our identity and our dark phases. The acorn next experiences something extraordinary. Something entirely new and unexpected grows from the crack. Something mysterious and green moves from within it and upward toward the surface. From the cracks that have appeared in our old identity, new and unique qualities emerge that are beyond our dreams, and they start to seek expression in the world. From the dark, the acorn sends a shoot upward towards the light, and it breaks through the surface of its darkness to express a form, a sprout that, although similar to other sprouts, is completely unique in its expression. We begin to show a quality of ourselves that may feel strange at first, but expresses itself outwardly nonetheless. Its expression is unique, one of a kind, and will never be expressed in this way by anyone else ever. The acorn sprout is the oak tree. If it continues to grow, nature will help to nurture and feed its evolution naturally. Our first natural expression of our genius is our genius, and the same forces of nurturance and care are at work. Genius has a vested interest in our growth and maturation. When we enter the genius journey, it's not as an isolated pilgrim, but as a child belonging to a great cultural lineage and tribe who has been greatly missed and who is on his or her way home again. Although we can be said to be fortunate if we express our genius in this life, we are actually fortunate because of the genius that resides in the DNA of our consciousness. It is a genuine quality and ingredient that each of us has in the marrow of our being, like blood, like bone.